All right, I think we're going to start here in about 5 minutes. All right, how many of you need to go to their Period A class? Which is fine. You can go to your Period A class, but just keep in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to position myself in the back. Right before Period A, before you leave, I want to check you out so that I can send attendants your name so that they know that you're going to be in period. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so without further ado, Mr. Sharma here, he is a writer for the Athletic website, and I think that you've all seen my email about this. He is the Cubs beat reporter, which is really awesome, and he's going to talk about his career.
Thanks for coming out. So I'll just start. My name is Sahadev Sharma. I cover the Cubs for a website called The Athletic. What The Athletic is we started about 2 years ago. Our 2-year anniversary was January 23rd, I want to say. We're local sports coverage, trying to cover all the major sports, and then whether it goes to high school or smaller stuff like the Chicago Fire, we experiment with that stuff. I cover the Cubs. I covered the Cubs 2016 World Series run for The Athletic. Since then, we've expanded from Chicago to Toronto to Cleveland to Detroit to all over the country. We're national now. We have the joke in Canada is that if you're a hockey writer, you work for The Athletic because we hired so many hockey writers across the country. And we're doing the same thing now with baseball, which is very exciting for me because I was the first full-time baseball writer for the company, and now people that I've worked with for years, colleagues, guys that I looked up to, people that I really respect, are now my teammates, and we all work together and cover baseball together for The Athletic. If you haven't heard of us, hopefully you will in a few years. Hopefully some of your parents are subscribers, or friends, or uncles, or cousins, or whoever. I'm sure we don't have a lot of high school kids paying. It's a subscription, monthly subscription site, so I'm not sure if high school kids are paying for sports coverage, but maybe in a couple of years when you guys are in college and have extra jobs, you can spend a couple bucks a month for The Athletic. The most common question I get, and I'm sure most of you are wondering, how do you get into this business? How do you get to cover the Cubs? How do you get to cover a team that you grew up rooting for, or whatever it is? The answer is it's really hard. It takes a lot of luck, and it takes a lot of hard work. I think those are the two things, luck and hard work. You need to combine that and somehow find a way. My path was very different than what your path is going to likely be. I was pre-med when I started college. I switched to engineering. I had no clue what I wanted to do. Even in high school, I didn't really have a firm idea. I got my engineering degree, was unhappy doing that, and decided I'm going to go after my dream, go write about baseball, go write about sports. I got an internship at ESPN Radio, worked there unpaid for a year, showed up. I had 3 days I was supposed to show up. I showed up those 3 days early, plus every Saturday and Sunday. It's not an ideal way to go about it because I was 23, 24, on the verge of getting married, had rent to pay, and they didn't pay me any money to show up 40, 50 hours a week. But I opened some eyes, impressed the right people, and slowly made my way to this job. And I'm the full-time Cubs beat writer. Have lot of followers and people that read my work and respect my work around both fans that are reading and both colleagues that say, hey, you're actually doing some real work, good work here. So it's you need to find. I think the most important thing is when I say you need luck. It's that hard work leads to the luck, right? It leads to someone that has either the right job or knows the right people will see that how hard you're working, how much you know, how much you're contributing, and they'll give you that break. That's always the way this works. Someone sees what you're doing and gives you that break. The funniest thing that I always see are people that are a little afraid to use who they know. When I say use who they know, and not use them, but you know someone that is further along in this business than you are, and they say, hey, you're really good, let me help you. And there are people that are afraid to take that help, that say, no, I need to do this on my own. They're too proud and say, no, this is my career, I have to make it happen. But that's how you make it happen. Letting someone else help you, letting someone else that knows what they're doing, that's been through it all, say, hey, I can help you along. I can recommend you to a friend who may need someone with your skill set. Never be afraid to ask for help or to take help along the way. I think that's something far too often I have to convince younger people. It's okay. You still did it on your own. Just because you're asking for assistance or taking assistance doesn't mean you didn't earn that. Day-to-day activities, that's something that people don't really understand what I do. I don't show up to a baseball game at first pitch, sit there for 3 hours and watch the game and then write. Baseball is probably the most intensive for a reporter. You show up 4 hours before the game starts. You go into the clubhouse about 2.5 hours beforehand, talk to players, talk to the manager. After the clubhouse closes, you try and talk to people on the field, try and talk to front office people like Theo Epstein, Jed Hoyer, figure out what's going on with the team. Watch the game, start writing, start transcribing. Transcribing, if you guys become reporters, transcribing is the worst part. Hopefully someday, if you guys can invent some sort of app that just takes my recordings and transcribes it perfectly without any mistakes, you'll be rich, believe me, because that's every reporter's dream is finding that perfect app. None of them work right now. We've all tried them and they don't work. So that takes up a lot of your time, transcribing what people have said. And then after the game, we go back into the clubhouse, interview the players, interview the manager, and then for another hour or two after that, we write our stories and turn them in, and that's what you all read at the end of the day. So it's a long day, especially baseball, because these games are 3.5 hours long. So you're sitting there in the press box working for a while. My season starts, I'm leaving for Arizona on Sunday, so that's February 11th. And then my season will end probably mid-October, late October, depending how far the Cubs go. So that's, 8 months of work, and then 4 months of off-season where you're working constantly. So as much as people say, oh, you just get to watch baseball all day and talk to baseball players, sure, it's awesome. I'm never going to complain about my job, but it is a long day, long hours. I do not get to see my wife and kids during the summer as much as I'd like to. But again, I'm covering baseball, so it's amazing. I love it, every minute of it. But you have to remember that it may be viewed as a dream job for many, but it is a lot of hard work and a lot of time spent away from home and family. Something I'm seeing right now, I don't know how many of you actually want to go into sports journalism, but I'm seeing a lot of women in the crowd, and that's amazing, because that's probably the biggest thing that I and many of my colleagues have issues with, is the diversity in sports journalism. Not enough women in the business, not enough people of color in the business, and that's something we're working to find ways to get more people interested, get more people to move up the ranks. It's not where it needs to be, but The Athletic is trying to be better about that, better than most of the mainstream media is, and I hope it's something that, just seeing this class, I hope that's a sign that's going to start changing with younger people too, more people getting into the business. Those are the two main things I always get asked, is how I get into the business and what my day-to-day activities are. If you have more questions, anything, whether it's something silly about the Cubs or how to get into the business, to something specific, please feel free to ask. I'm not sure if there's anything specific that I have off the top of my head, but please just shoot questions my way. Anything. No questions? Are you guys sure?
I'll ask the first one.
Sure.
So a couple of things that I like that you brought up. I'm actually the college and career counselor here. So the idea of the fact that you started pre-med and went engineering, and now you're in journalism.
Yeah.
Can you talk about two things? Talk about this idea of being undecided and that comfort of sometimes it's okay that you don't know what you want to do when you grow up, and you still might not know what you want to do when you grow up, but getting yourself those opportunities. But with that, also the importance of not just for your job, but overall, the importance of being effective writers. Because I actually came from the college admission side, and with texting and shorthand sorts of communication, you would be appalled at some of the things that I saw from students with very high GPAs and very high test scores. So.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up, different majors and things like that, because something that a lot of people say right now is don't major in journalism. I'm not sure if I agree with that. I did not, obviously, as I said, I had multiple different majors and ended up with an engineering degree and a writing degree. I think when I talked about making connections, going into journalism will help you with that for sure, because you're with people that, whether it's you're a freshman and you meet some seniors and they graduate and they get jobs, I think that's a big deal. You'll meet people that are going to progress and be in the business, and they'll remember, hey, that's that kid that I remember how smart that person was. I remember how good their work was. Maybe I should give them a chance or give them an internship, whatever it is. So I don't completely agree with the notion that journalism isn't the right path to get into journalism, but I also think it's really important to have a variety of different subjects that you're aware of, whether you minor in math or minor in business or history. All these different things impact how you do your job. I know for me, my biggest regret is not really diving into Spanish like I should have when I was a kid. When I was younger, I was good at Spanish, and I took it all the way through high school, but I didn't work on it in college, and now I'm trying to regain that skill, and I'm trying to learn Spanish because the most important thing when you're interviewing a subject, whoever you're talking to, you want them to be comfortable with you, because you want them to feel like they can trust you, and whatever they say is going to be put out there properly, right? And that comes back to when you were talking about being able to write well and express yourself well. It's part of what we're trying to do at The Athletic is bring the written word back. You see so many websites talking about pivoting to video, and it's all about video. That's fine, that's good. I think that's a good medium as well. But the written word, writing, whether it's 500 words or a deep dive that's 10,000 words on a really intriguing subject, those are worthwhile and deep dives and things that you really need to work on your writing skills if you're going to pull that off. If you're going to pull in the audience for 10,000 words to get someone to go through that whole story, you better have a great subject and you better be a really good, competent writer. I mean, you can't just be a competent writer. You have to be a great writer to pull off 10,000 words, right? I'd say this morning I wrote like 1,200 words on the Cubs, and that's about average. But I'd say day to day a good solid piece, 800 to 1,200. Now you've got a longer piece there. I'd say with today's with what we see most of the time today, as far as newspapers and sports websites. But getting back to being able to really interview a subject well, the reason I say knowing Spanish, if I knew Spanish, I could have interviewed Aroldis Chapman or Jorge Soler much better than using an interpreter. Nobody wants to really get down in the nitty-gritty and talk to you through an interpreter and really talk about how do I interact with that person? How do I really get to know them before I turn on my mic, right? When I talk to Chris Bryant, I can talk to him about, what's it like being married? What's it like, what do you do for fun? And kind of get to know him as a person, and then we can start talking about baseball. He feels comfortable with me. He lets down his guard because I joked about something that he's watching on TV, and we made a laugh together. And now it's okay. Let's get down to baseball talk. Let's get down to swing mechanics, and he's comfortable with me. I can't do that with with someone whose English is either they barely speak English or they speak very limited English or they don't speak English at all. How am I supposed to get involved and really get a deep interview going? Yes.
It's kind of two-part.
Mhm.
Is Anthony Rizzo as cool as he seems like in the clubhouse? He seems like a really great leader with a lot of spunk, despite his youth. And then, has that changed since Grandpa Rossi's not there anymore? Like it seemed like those two really jived and that they had a really great relationship.
It's interesting. I'd say the Cubs would love for Anthony Rizzo to be a leader. They'd love for him to be that guy. I'd say it needs to be a little bit more organic than how it's been the past few years. Rizzo is very personable. He's an amazing person off the field. We've all seen what he does for cancer charities. That's rare, the amount of money and the amount of time he spends on that. I would say, is he a team leader? That's so hard to really become and be. I honestly, I think he needs to work on that a bit, because I think sometimes when you want to be that, it works against you. It has to be more natural. It's not that he's a bad guy in the clubhouse at all. He gets along great with everyone. I just think there are ways. David Ross had this magnetic personality. He still does. Anyone, the second media walked in there, he'd scream at us in a very friendly way, like, "Hey, media, how's it going? What's up?" And he did that with not just the media, with every player, everybody that walked in. He'd scream across the room and say hi to them. The Latin American players, he'd get along with them. You have to be able to get along with everyone, right, and really engage and really make sure the whole clubhouse can come together. And he also earned the respect because part of it is showing up early, right? These guys, like I said, I get there 4 hours before a game. So say it's a 7 o'clock game, I'm there at 3. There are a lot of guys that don't show up. Maybe not a lot, but some guys that don't show up till 5. And if you're not there as a player until 2 hours before the game, and Rizzo has been guilty of this in the past. He's changed this. This is the thing that I think he needs to change the most to really embrace that role. That sets a bad example for the younger guys, right? Ian Happ comes up and sees people showing up at 5. He thinks, okay, I don't have to show up till 5. I don't need to put my work in. And as much as Joe Madden likes to say you don't need to come in that early, I think it does set, work on, you have issues with your swing, you have issues with defense. Showing up early and putting in that work sets the example for the younger people who say, oh, he's showing up at 2 every day for a 7 o'clock game and working his butt off. And really...
Would you say is Chris Bryant like that? It seems like Chris Bryant is like your ideal guy who's going to give you 110%.
Yeah, Chris is kind of a natural. I've never really met anyone like him when it comes to baseball. He's almost like everyone's smart at certain things, right? Everyone's special. They have whatever your focus is. You may be great at math, you may be great at history. Chris is just great at understanding baseball, and he has this desire, and it's not this obsessive desire, right? Which I think is special when you don't obsess over things and overthink it. He doesn't overthink anything. He knows when he notices a weakness that he may have, he identifies it, and then he figures out, how do I fix this? And he doesn't stress about it. That's what I've talked to him about, hey, I noticed you're striking out more the past 2 weeks. It's like, yeah, I've noticed it, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this, and what I need to do to correct it is this and this. And I'm working on it. So it's never stress about, oh no, I'm not doing this, what I need to do. So Chris is a really rare, that's a rare attribute to have, to not be overwhelmed with your failures, because he doesn't let it eat at him. He just somehow, he's able to push it aside and say, it's okay, I failed, I'm going to figure out a way to fix it. And that's a huge part of baseball, being able to accept failure and figure out a way to fix those issues.
He seems like he kind of
Yeah.
Seems like he would be more of a leader than Rizzo, but
You know,
Rizzo
I
would be a
don't-
lot more fun to hang out with.
Yeah, Chris. I don't think Chris wants to be a leader though.
Well, you know, let me come on.
Chris, I wouldn't say Chris wants to be the leader. I'd say Rizzo has a little bit more desire to be that guy. If you want, like, who I think that guy is Schwarber. Schwarber would have been that guy last year if he didn't struggle. You have to focus on yourself first, right, before you can lead other people, right? So he needs to get to that point with his career where he's comfortable doing what he does, and I think he's got the right personality and the right work ethic to be that leader. Baseball is a weird sport in the sense that leaders, it's not. I don't think it's defined the same way as other walks of life in general. So, but I think Schwarber really fits that mold. In fact,
When you're interviewing, what kind of questions do you ask?
what kind of questions do I ask when I'm interviewing? You want to ask how and why, in my opinion, to really get the best answers. If you can't leave it too open-ended. You don't want to ask, if you're in a big group, you don't want to ask multiple questions at once because they will either avoid the harder one or just forget it or not remember that you asked 2 questions. So you want to keep it as short as possible if you can, especially when you're in a bigger group. You want to stick to how and why, because how and why will get them to explain things. If you say what happened there or how, there are plenty of questions. Tell me about. That's what writers complain about the most. The tell me about question. When you say tell me about that play, it's almost not a question, right? It isn't a question. So writers get frustrated when they hear someone ask that question. There are go-to things that a lot of people just lean on. They have crutches. There's one. Some people just ask, "How fun was that?" And it's like, okay, the Cubs just won the World Series here. That's the question you're asking? It's very fun, I would assume. So you have to also, when you have your question, you have to also be knowledgeable, and you should have your own answer, your own theory to why that is. So if they give something, you can almost counteract and say, oh yes, I noticed this. Why is that happening? How did you go from using this pitch all the time to not using this pitch all the time and still succeed? Whatever it is, whatever your subject matter is, I've always found that how and why will get you the best answers, get you the best information to provide to the reader. Yes. So when I started, yes, I interviewed. I've interviewed also all teams because I've done. Before I became a Cubs beat writer, I was freelancing. So I was working for the AP. So sometimes I would cover the Cubs. Sometimes I would cover the Sox. Sometimes I'd cover the road team. When I worked for ESPN, I used to cover for the Red Sox beat writer. I used to cover for the Rangers beat writer when the Rangers and the Red Sox were in town. So I've interviewed all sorts of. I've only covered baseball. That's just because once I realized I wanted to be a reporter, I knew baseball was what I was best at. So, but most people, I shouldn't say most people, many people in this business cover all sorts of things. The traditional path for a beat writer would be you start with high school sports. You start in the preps section of newspapers. Obviously, newspapers aren't what they were when I was in high school. So it's kind of that path isn't the same now. So usually what happens is, what used to happen, preps, you start at preps, and then you hope to get on a beat, whether it's hockey, whether it's Bears, let's talk local, Bears or Blackhawks or White Sox, whatever it is. That's the next step after preps, right? Or college sports. So many of the guys that I work with, the people I work with, they covered all sorts of sports, but they've been shifted because where the newspaper decides, okay, we don't want to spend the money to have you cover the Blackhawks because that's just not bringing in enough readers or enough subscriptions, whatever it is. So they can switch them to the Cubs, right? That's I have a friend that was on the Blackhawks beat and is now on the White Sox beat. So you cover all sorts of things. But I've covered the White Sox for a lot of. Our first year we didn't have a White Sox beat writer, so I covered a lot of the White Sox. But the Cubs were, that was 2016, so I kind of that go to something else. Because that was kind of the biggest story in the city, in the country. Yes?
I advise the school newspaper, and this semester we had a huge staff. You guys can up my staff for the newspaper. There's three. But last semester we had 20-something. Can you talk about the importance, not just for them, I'm not singling them out, but since I've done the newspaper, of deadlines?
Oh yeah. So I think when you're covering sports, especially for me, I've only covered sports, so I don't know the other beats. I don't know the how important timeliness is. But just think about covering baseball, right? It's a 162 game season. If I don't meet my deadline, we don't see in the internet age. It's a little bit different. Newspapers are different than when I write for the athletic experience. That's the benefit for where I work. I don't have to stress about a deadline, but I see my colleagues stressing about deadlines. And I think, as someone that is been a procrastinator their entire life, I love working baseball because it forces me to meet my deadline. Because if I don't write this by tonight, if I don't get this done by tonight, there's a noon game tomorrow, and now I've just wasted all my time because I didn't get this up in a timely manner. And this isn't ready for people to read in the morning, right? And by the time they're done with that, if I procrastinate on that and I don't meet my deadline and then it's up, and it's up at noon and first pitch is at 12:05, I just wasted a whole day's worth of reading, right? Nobody wants to read
if you miss a deadline?
Do I get paid? Well, I'm salaried, so.
And do you get
freelance
in trouble?
So let me compare it to when I was freelancing for AP. That was hard deadlines. That was this. Once the game ends, you need to file. You need to have something ready to file. Unless it was a walk-off home run or extra inning games where you had to rewrite a bunch of times, you don't have a bunch of leeway there. So you have to get that in. Then you have to get down to the clubhouse and add and make sure you get enough quotes for whatever your story was to add into that. And it has to be done. I want to say AP deadlines were about an hour after the game ended. That's not a lot of time. That's no time because it takes me I'm very meticulous. I'm glad I don't have hard deadlines because I like to stay in the clubhouse late and to talk to people one-on-one and avoid the big scrums and all the people asking questions so I can get my own information. So I don't love having that hour deadline, but AP, they have strict deadlines. They have to get it for the papers to have those game stories in. I think it's good to have that because it just gets you used to being organized, figuring out how I'm going to, okay, what am I looking for in this game? What's the most important thing in this game? How do I get that? How do I put that in the lead? And also tell you everything that happened that's important. I think all those things are skills that you have to have in order to move past that even if you don't have a hard deadline, because it's just, it puts it in your head that, okay, I'm not going to dawdle. I'm not going to mess around here. I have things I need to get done. Once I'm done in the clubhouse, I need to get my work done and get it out there in a timely manner. I like to make sure that I have something unique and different that justifies, hey, I don't have this hard deadline, so maybe it takes a little bit longer for me to get it out there, but I have a ton more information than the average person does. So I think there's a give and take when it comes to deadlines, but I also think having a deadline and having that organization really helps you become a better writer.
How did you start covering the clubs? How did you get comfortable in the clubhouse rather than how did you hold it?
Yeah, it's okay. So my first time in a clubhouse was 2009, right? So I was lucky enough that I had someone with me who has been covering Chicago baseball since the mid '80s. He asked me. I produced his radio show. Impressed him enough that one day he asked me, "What do you want to do? What would you like to do?" And I told him, "I want to be a baseball reporter." He said, "Well, have you gone to a game yet?" "No, I've not. I've never been there." He said, "Come with me. You're coming with me. If this is what you want to do, you have to stay. You have to do it. You have to go out there and start talking to players." So I was lucky enough that I was with someone that told me, "You can't go in there. Don't approach a guy when he's doing this. You're sitting in his locker. Try and approach him and say, 'Hey, do you have a few minutes? Introduce yourself. Let him know what you want to talk about.'" So it helped me that I had someone there to show me the ropes and tell me what to do. an experienced person at that that knows everyone in the clubhouse. It's not easy, especially if you're a fan. But for me, that's what I do.
Period A is going to start. So there's no bell. Here we can hear the bell, I guess, or there maybe. So if you need to go to period A, you need to go now.
Probably.
Just start up again. Yeah. I mean,
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
yeah, thank you. Sure.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question was, how knowledgeable do you have to be on statistics and math to report on baseball? I would say it's a good attribute to have. You need to be, so there are two things. There are two things. You can be a person that knows a ton of math and creates and knows a ton about baseball and creates new statistics, right? I studied a pretty high level of math in an engineering degree. I haven't practiced that in years. I have no desire to create my own statistics. What I want to make sure is that I understand what the stat means. I don't need to know how the stat was created. Like some little part, like the really complicated ones, I'd like to know a little bit, like, okay, what does this mean? Why is this good, bad, whatever, you know? You just want to kind of understand what it means and how to apply it properly. The biggest thing that I've seen is people obsess over statistics and then either overvalue something that really doesn't matter or just completely misuse the statistics. So you want to know what it means, and if you're not the type that really understands math or is going to create your own statistic, then talk to someone that knows and understands and can explain it well, right? And not in like this super math way that's going to go over your head, right? You just want to, okay, this means that when he's up to bat, he swings at, balls in the dirt too often, whatever it is, right? So you just want to make sure that you understand what it means in baseball terms if you're not going to understand it in math terms, right? So that's how I look at it. It's important to know statistics in baseball and be able to use it because it can make your writing better, and as long as you can communicate it in a way that's not going to go over people's heads, it's going to be very useful. Yeah.
You said you're salary. What kind of how much money do you make off season?
I'm sorry. How much?
Like how much? What do you do in the off?
Okay, what do I do in the off season? So if you're not salary, if you're not full time, so I get paid the same whether it's the season or not because I'm a full time employee. But if you're freelance, that's when these issues become an issue, right? When I didn't have a full time gig, the off season was really hard to figure out how I was going to make ends meet, right? Because I didn't have games to cover, and I wasn't well known enough to go cover basketball or football or anything like that. Nor did I really want to, but that's a separate issue. But you have to, if you're freelance, you have to figure out other ways to do this. You either have to get another part-time job, you you have to get a winter job. If we're talking about baseball, you have to cover other sports, or even not sports. You know, you have to be willing to go outside your comfort zone. If your comfort zone is sports, you have to go cover something else for a newspaper, whatever it is. You have to figure out different ways. It's not freelance life is not a convenient one. It's not an easy one, and I honestly don't even know where it's headed because the business is changing so much that it's going to transform into something else that I'm not completely clear what it will be, just because the way newspapers are allocating funds now, maybe even they're reducing full-time people more often and making it more freelance. So maybe there's more work to be had as freelance, but we're in a weird transition right now with this industry, so it's hard for me to really say where you make your money in an off season if you're on a beat. But it's for me, I'm lucky I don't have to worry about that, but I have in the past had to struggle with it, and there's no easy answer. Is basically what I'm saying. You have to figure out. You have to be creative and be willing to do whatever your connection may say. Hey, buddy, I have this assignment. This guy's really looking for someone to dig into this story. I remember I wrote a story about my first two big stories on ESPN were just assigned to me by my editor. One was a Sox fan who got a tattoo of the Sox on her calf, but it was backwards. So she was suing the tattoo company, and it was just a story about how this happened and who's to blame and all that. And it was literally the most popular story on ESPN.com. It's just a random story, right? So you just find these random stories. Another one was this tobacco alternative that people were using, coffee grounds, because baseball players use tobacco, right? So these ex-ball players created a company to chew coffee grounds, and it keeps you awake for one thing, gives you a little caffeine boost, and it's not bad for you like tobacco. So those are just random stories like that are the type of things that you can do in any time of season, right? It doesn't matter if it's baseball season or not. So you have to find weird things like that to make your ends meet sometimes. And if you have an editor or a friend that has that, that's how you have to just be willing to dig into random stories like that. Yes?
Before you got your degree in journalism, which journalist did you follow?
What journalist did I follow?
Yeah.
Oh man. So for me, it was mostly just, like I said, I'm a baseball nut. So it was people like Buster Olney, Keith Law, Peter Gammons, just baseball writers. They're now, a few of them work for The Athletic, like Peter Gammons, Ken Rosenthal. I would recommend, just as far as are you wondering like how to become better, like who you should follow to be better at your job, essentially? Yeah, I would just read. Just read in general. Reading is the thing that has made me a better writer, because it's not one particular writer. The other guy on the beat with me, Patrick Mooney, I used to read his work a lot, and it helped me realize I need to set a scene better. I need to tell the story of what's happening, what I see, more than just regurgitating a quote, right? So just in between, Chris Bryant was standing at his locker, and you can write that scene, right? What was in his locker that isn't, not getting too personal, but just like, you can set a scene, or someone is being loud next to him, or the music that was playing in the background, stuff like that. Set that scene and things like that. Like, that's something that I learned reading another writer. Like, ooh, I need to be better at that. I'm not setting the scene well enough. Just novels that your lit teachers are telling you are assigning to you, that type of stuff. Whether it's old stuff, new stuff, any sort of writing, even if it's not the type of journalism that you want to get into, fiction, nonfiction, all that stuff has helped me become a better writer. And I think that's more important than following one single journalist or anything like that. But I will say, if you're getting into sports, like there's every year there's a new series called the Greatest Sports Writing. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but there's a huge book every year, the Greatest Sports Writing of the Year. And I always read that to just kind of refresh me and say, like, oh, these guys are doing great work. This is what I need to try and get to. I know there was one particular beat writer, Andy McCullough, who wrote this great piece, and the piece that I'm most proud of that I've ever written was inspired because I read one of his pieces and I want to write something like this. I want to do it, and I was able to pull it off. It takes a lot of time, a lot of digging into to really set the scene and really get all the information. But when you find that one piece, and you're like, yeah, that's what I want. Try to figure out a way to do that yourself. Yes.
Let's say you have a deadline and you experience writer's block. What's your best method for self-promotion?
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure if there's a single method. He asked how do you deal with writer's block essentially, especially on deadline. I guess for me, I'm not someone that stresses a lot or overthinks things. So it's easier for me when I have a deadline to not have writer's block because I have no choice, right? I have to get this up. So I feel like writer's block is more an issue of I don't have a topic, right? I don't have something to write about. That's how I define writer's block. I think it's different for everyone, though, right? Sometimes you're struggling to come up with words. You have a topic, but you just don't have a way to explain it, or I'm not sure if there's any tried and true method that works. For me, it's I'm at a game. I have to pick a subject, something about this game to write about, and I just have to go. I don't have it. It's almost like there's an adrenaline rush, right? You have to get it done. You're doing it with the World Series. I mean, think about it. I'm covering the big. I'm never going to cover something bigger than the Cubs winning the World Series, right? I already covered the biggest story. I already peaked in my career. There's no way I can cover a bigger story because there's no bigger sports story in the world than the Cubs ending 108 years of futility, right? So I couldn't even tell you what I was thinking at that time. All I knew was like, I have to, during the entire game, I'm writing, here's a big moment, and I wrote notes and tried to remember it. Of course, as the game, if anybody remembers Game 7, the way it unraveled, I had to change my mind about what I was writing about 50 times, right? So it's more about like, okay, here are my topics, this is what I'm going to write about, and then you just go. You don't have time to have a mental block because you just have to get it done. That's how I work. I wish I had a better method for you, but that's, when you're under pressure and you have to get it done, sometimes that's the best way to get past writer's block. Yeah. Artists, workers, Schwarber, Hendricks, Zobrist, Wilson, Contreras. Wade Davis was awesome. Great example for the other relievers too. John Lester's a great example for younger guys as well. I'm trying to think, who am I missing? Rizzo and Bryant work hard. I'd say Rizzo, is learning to show up a little bit earlier, more often. Hayward works really hard. It's frustrating that he can't get it going at the plate because you see how much he works. There's probably a bunch of other guys that I'm missing, but those are the guys that stand out. But definitely Schwarber's the guy that comes to my mind first. One of the hardest workers I've seen. He and Hal, too. Yeah.
So with the rise of the internet, what do you think the future of the sports industry, sports broadcasting industry, sports writing industry lies?
Yeah, I'd love it for it to be the Athletic. I think we're a subscription-based site. The whole point is to pay the journalists well, and if you're talking about the written word, the journalists need to be able to have time to do what they want to do, not worry about the minutia and the day-to-day stuff, right? I don't write a game story. I don't call it a game story. I'm not going to give you a play-by-play when I write, right? I think those are good skills to learn to build up as a journalist and to be able to do those things. But the reality is, I don't want to just write about here's what happened in the game and go step by step. This is how the runs were scored. This was blah 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 blah. You can get that via Twitter. I put that out on Twitter. I don't put out the little things. I don't write about the little things. I write. I guess I do. Sometimes I do write about little things. Either you get really granular and talk about the details and ask the ball players questions and get more details. I don't. I would like to think that if you can give the reader a really good product, they're willing to pay for it. I think we're starting to prove that at the Athletic. We've done so, but I think the future of writing has to be, you have to find a way to pay the writers well, right? The biggest complaint I get from baseball writers in newspapers is that their work has gone up while their pay has stagnated, right? So they fired all the photographers, they fired all the video people, and now you have writers taking pictures, taking video, and then they fired all the freelance people. They're not hiring freelance people, so then they have to, instead of 3 pieces a day, they're writing 8 pieces a day, and and 6 of them are these, 400, 200 word just notes, things that I think you can tweet out. Like, I don't need to write a story about the 25th man on the Cubs roster being sent to the minor leagues and a swing man being called up. Like, those aren't things that someone's going to pick up or subscribe to a website for or click on a link, right? You can. That's 280 characters, right? Less than that. Just send it out in a tweet. Most sports fans have Twitter now. Follow along on Twitter, whether it's that or Instagram, whatever. Social media can handle and take care of the minutia. And my job should be to give you really good details that you can't get anywhere else. I think that, I really hope that readers appreciate that and then understand that there's a big difference between just recapping what happened and giving you inside information that you can't get anywhere without the access and the ability to talk to these guys in great detail. Yes?
Earlier you mentioned like networking and how important that is like in the industry. How who would you network with? Like how would you like go about that?
So all I can say is what I've done. What I did was I got an internship at ESPN, right? And that name alone on your resume helps, right? You work at ESPN. So when you get there, work hard and talk to the right people there, right? That's the beginning of networking, right? So when you're at the ballpark or wherever you are that you're working, right? Other journalists are going to see how you work, right? The questions you ask, whether you are easy to work with, even as a competitor. Are you a pain in the butt to work with? Are you easy to get along with? And then, hey, that person starts a company. Or how did I get my job at the Athletic? Someone that I worked with at ESPN got laid off and got approached by the Athletic when they said who should cover the Cubs. That was the first name that they came up with because I worked with them at ESPN. He saw how hard I worked. He saw how creative I was with the stories I came up with. So that's what I consider networking. Just other people seeing that you're working with, whether they're competitors, whether they're colleagues, whatever they are, they see how hard you work, and you talk to them about the game, or you talk to them about whatever, just having fun, and that's your day-to-day life, talking to them about your job. They'll see how much you know and how hard you work, and all those things, and that's how I think the best way to network. You see, or if there's someone that you respect, and you approach them and talk to them and say, hey, I'd love to pick your brain. Could I get your email? Could I get your card? Can we have coffee sometime and just talk about the business? When they see that you're so interested and care about it, if they're a good person and they can help you in some way and they care about it as much as you do, they'll see that and either they can help you right away, maybe they can't help you right away. Maybe it's years down the line, but it'll be filed away and they'll notice your hard work and your dedication and your talent. Is that it? For me, it was I was 6 months away from graduating with an engineering degree. I had an internship with a job lined up, and I was talking to my brother, who's 5 years older than me, went to Carmel High School, and I was 22 or 23 at the time. I can't remember exactly. No, I was older. I was 25. I was 25, and I said. He said, why aren't you excited? You could tell I wasn't excited that I was graduating. He said, you're going to be done with college finally, you have a full-time job, you can start your life. You don't have to worry about this stuff. I just said I'm not happy. He said, what do you want to do? Just put me on the spot. What do you want to do? What'll make you happy? Towards journalism. So he told me to go for it. And I listened to him because he's my big brother. And I said, okay, if he says I can do it, then I'm going to do it. And I think I just needed to push. I needed to say it out loud that I didn't want to do what I was doing anymore, and have someone tell me, okay, then go get what you want to do. Right? It doesn't always work out the way it does for me. It's going to be very different for everyone how they figure out what they want to do. You may know what you want to do now, and maybe 100% right. That wasn't the case for me, so I needed to have some missteps along the way to figure out what I wanted to do. And I think without those missteps, I wouldn't be as good as what I do either, because I really appreciate it. I really know how hard it was to get here. So I didn't let it go in a sense. Yeah.
What's it like working with those
I mean, what do you mean? What's it like? Like, is it
like how is it more than what you see like small clips of journalists
sure.
asking questions and whatnot?
Yeah, so press conference goes, PR guy introduces what's going on. Let's use Theo Epstein's first press conference as an example for me. So introduces Theo Epstein, and Theo has an opening statement. We get about 10 questions in there, and then once that ends, that's what you guys see, right? You guys see that, get most of the clips from there. Then usually say it's Theo Epstein, it's Tom Ricketts, and whoever else. They kind of linger after that, and you can get group interviews, you can get one-on-one interviews. So that's how it works after. The press conference is usually where you try and get the big picture questions out of the way, and then the journalists after that, they go and harass the people who were part of that and get more nitty-gritty and the better questions are usually not during the press conference, unless you're told beforehand that there will be no availability afterwards, which is really rare unless it's a controversial press conference, right? Unless there's something that isn't positive being talked about, then they'll limit their availability afterwards. Is that it? You good? All right. All right, next.
All right, one more round of applause, please. Just so we get that going. We have about 15 minutes, and I'm not going to send you back to A for 15 minutes, if that's all right, because I don't want to have to email a bunch of people about you, unless I guess you guys can class back if you want. But if you guys just want to mill in here until 2, and then we'll go back to homework. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Charles.
You fixed the name. The name.